squares. All righty. So everyone had an awesome day?
Yes.
I love that. I love that, right? It's always just a choice. You might as well choose awesome, right? All right, so a couple of quickies, and then I'm going to dive back into what I didn't do this morning. So a couple of quick reminders. Reminder number one, please be reminded that .loop is now scheduled to go by car in a month, right? So we now have a firm date on that. That's May the 15th. So be certain over the course of the next couple of weeks, you're spending a lot of time and effort and energy making sure that you understand how to upload all of your documents through command. And if you still require a digital signature type system, that you are learning to use DocuSign. I know there are a couple of things that we still need to do on the Market Center side to get DocuSign exactly where it needs to be for you. And what I would say is just start using it anyway, right? Use what's available and what's ready, and use some workarounds for the stuff that isn't quite ready. But we are now down to a month, and that will not change this time. I know we've said that a couple of different times. That will not change. That is now the official end date for .loop. So be prepared for that. Tomorrow at 11, I know there's something on our schedule tomorrow at 11. I don't remember exactly what it is, but there is also something going on with the Greenwich Association of Realtors, and some of you may have seen that and signed up for it. I am going to just shoot my link out tomorrow morning, so you don't have to worry about registering or whatnot. If those of you who are not members, I'll just give you mine, my link, and it's a Zoom call where they're going to discuss the different pieces of the PPP and the SBA loans and the economic injury disaster loans and grants and all the ins and outs of that. I think for the most part, we've covered most of all of that. And Steve is saying that tomorrow at 11 is Facebook ads. And so if you don't want to miss the Facebook ads, which I encourage you not to miss, I will be on the Greenwich piece, and I can always, any new information I can talk about at 4:30 tomorrow. However, if you choose to be on the Greenwich call to understand a little bit more about some of these programs inside of the CARES Act, I will make that link available to you. Again, I think it's awesome they're doing this. I think they're a little late to the party, right? When we've kind of talked about this for the last 2 weeks, and most of you have either applied or decided it's not really worth it, or whatever you've decided. However, if you still have questions and you want to plug into that, I offer that to you. And you should have seen earlier that the seller meeting that we will be hosting specifically for your sellers and for listing agents will be held Wednesday at 7 o'clock. For those of you in Ignite, we'll push through Ignite right to the end at 6:30, and then just take a quick break and then dive in with your sellers. And I had a couple of questions about what does that seller call really look like, and it's a simple call. It's just the Market Center taking responsibility for communicating information to each of your sellers from a place of support, to make sure that they not only feel the love from you, but feel the love from the Market Center as well. I'm going to run through Fairfield County statistics with them in terms of listings taken, in terms of under contracts, and what the market's looking like. Since we have sellers from all over the county and then even outside of the county, it's impossible for me to spend specific time on specific towns. So that remains a conversation that you'll need to have with each of your sellers. However, I'll give them a little more global information, some projections as to what we think we may see and why. Some of that has everything to do with economics and unemployment, about where we may see all this headed, and then we'll give them a quick 10,000-foot view of the business environment that we're currently in. Meaning, what are some of the struggles that we're having? You know, are we seeing everyone be very agreeable with our disclosure and consent forms? Are we seeing buyers behaving themselves inside of people's homes? And just kind of give them some reassurance that even though last time we spoke with them, we were giving them the whole big long list of all the protocols, we are not doing that again. So if I never have to talk about the list of showing protocols ever in my entire life, that would be just fine with me. However, we will give them just kind of a status as to where we are and what they can continue to expect. So it will be short. I expect what I have to deliver to them will be 15, maybe 20 minutes tops. I have asked, for those of you who saw what I sent out earlier, if they do have specific questions, best to get those questions to you beforehand, and then you get them to me. I love that a whole lot more than open mic night with sellers, right? So, so let's see if we can't, and I will make the chat available just because it's a little safer. People have to actually type, so sometimes their tone is not evident in a chat versus opening the mics up. So that's what tomorrow night looks like. If you haven't gotten that out to your sellers, I do ask that you do let them know that. Let that be their decision whether or not they want to plug into that. I promise not to say or do anything that will embarrass you or upset your sellers. Any questions on any of that? No? All right, so let's finish up today with where I started to go this morning and then ran out of time, and that is prepping for June 1st. And so the prep for June 1st is something that I think we need to really start being very, very focused on. And what I mean by that is, you know, there is no accountability without accounting, right? Carlos reminded me of that this morning. So thank you, Carlos, for reminding me of that. And so the idea of what are we accounting for? What are we tracking? What are those things that we need to look at to make sure that we're ready for June 1st? And so I want to list a couple of things for you that I want you to be thinking about this week and starting to track and understand so that you are putting your arms around your business in the next few weeks, getting it ready for June the 1st. That does not mean, please don't hear that as me saying, put your feet up and don't worry about anything until June the 1st. I am so not saying that. What I am saying is, oftentimes, for many of us, what we can do between now and June 1st may be limited. It may not be where you want it to be. You may find that transactions are not coming together as quickly, or listings are not going on the market as swiftly as they could or should be, were we not in our current circumstances. And so all I'm talking about in terms of being ready for June the 1st is that I am optimistically looking at that as kind of opening day. And I want you, even if you're challenged to have nothing happen between now and then, which for most of you is completely not the path that will show up, because many of you are continuing to write and post business every day for the past 3 weeks, and I see no reason why you won't continue that. However, once things open up, things will open up. And so I want us to be really ready to take full advantage of that. And so I want you to start tracking a couple of things, and maybe even go back a week or two to see where you fall on this, starting maybe April 1. And that is, what are your listings taken? All right, I want you to be tracking your listings taken. The ones you actually took and put on the market. And then I want you to track listings taken that you actually took that are waiting until things open up. And again, I'm just going to call that June the 1st. So how many listings have you taken in the last 2 weeks? How many listings have you taken that you've signed that aren't going on the market until things open up? That's a different number, right? How many buyer listings have you taken in the last 2 weeks? Right, that's new buyers signed that you're actually going out with and showing property to. How many buyer listings have you taken that are currently waiting till June the 1st? Right, so 2 categories, buyer, seller, and inside of those 2 categories are another 2 categories. What have you actually taken and made active? and then what have you taken, and those folks are waiting. And then I want you to have another category that says all business that you're confident that you will have come June the 1st. So that means buyers or sellers that are unwilling right now to sign a document and start their relationship with you. However, you know full well that once things open up, they're the first people who are going to call and say, okay, now I want to sign. Now I want to get things going. It's lovely to think that we can all take the listings and get the buyers under agreement, signed with an agreement right now. And that will not be true for everyone every time. So I want you to track that a little separately. And then the next thing I want you to track is business that you already had that's currently waiting until June the 1st, right? Some of you had listings or had buyers who were kind of hot and heavy who have said, I think I'm going to remove the property from the market, or I think I'm going to push the pause button. So those are a bunch of different categories that I want you to really have a full understanding of and start watching and tracking. The reason I want you to start watching and tracking that at the Market Center level, I'm going to give you a quick example. At the Market Center level, what we're doing is we're looking at some of these same numbers in a slightly different way. We're looking at how many listings we've actually taken month to date in April. And we're looking last year and seeing how many listings we actually took in April. Right? The two market centers combined last April, I think, took about 180 or so new listings, 175 new listings, right? And so tomorrow morning, when I get the report on what we've currently taken so far in April, we'll be able to calculate the percentage of listings taken, which is a leading measure. It's right, that's that measure that looks ahead to our income. We'll be able to calculate that we are down by X. Maybe that's 20%, maybe it's 30%. And then I can take a look at June's income and July's income and start applying some of those same numbers to June and July, maybe August's income, right? If we're down by 30% in listings taken in April, that may mean that June into July may be down 30% or so in income, so that we can start getting our arms around what we might realistically be looking at, right? What we're trying to do is help each of us not have to guess quite as much, because right now it seems like it's impossible to know what the future holds. And it's a little less impossible than you think when you start to really track what's going on in April and compare it to last year, come up with that differential, and then start looking ahead in terms of income. Does that make sense to everybody? So that's why I'm asking you to be really specific about these categories and track these numbers so that we can continue to have conversations based on the numbers in these categories and how that looks to you versus last year versus what other people are seeing, right? Because that's the other thing I want to know. If I'm Jeannie and we get on a call and we all start sharing our numbers, and everyone else is saying that their listings taken year over year are down like 20% and Jeannie's are down 50%, well now we have an opportunity to say, okay, well, what's affecting Jeannie differently, right? Maybe Jeannie's not saying something that others of you are, and so we get to make sure that we're all kind of holding the line or better, and not just assuming, right? Because what we want to make sure is that Jeannie just doesn't think that, well, I'm down 50%. Well, I'm sure everyone's down 50%. I want us to know. I want us to know exactly what we're down so that we can help each other and help ourselves look forward and figure things out a little bit more specifically. Does that make sense to everybody? Cool. Last couple of things. I also want you to be writing this week what systems you're going to be working on over the course of the next 6 weeks. What systems don't exist in your business right now that you keep thinking, wow, I keep hearing these things at trainings. I wish I would put them into play. Pick one of them and start getting it done. I want you to have a short checklist, and then bam, start knocking those things out. That could be how you're working with command. It could be how you're working with DocuSign. It could be a percentage of people in your database who have downloaded the KW Consumer app. What percentage are you at today, and where do you want to be 6 weeks from now, right? Steve keeps pushing that class for tomorrow at 11 o'clock, that Facebook ads class, right? And so he's saying stockpile those, keep running those ads, target down county in New York, right? Westchester, people who are going to be moving this way, and stockpile those leads. Do you have a listing system? Do you have a contract to close system? Do you have an open house follow-up system? Do you have a 36 touch system in place? All of those systems that many of you hear and say, yeah, I'd love to get to that. I'm just not sure I have the time. Well, you might, depending, have more time in the next couple of weeks to be getting some of these systems down. Are you focusing on building an agent-to-agent referral network over the course of the next 4 to 6 weeks? We talked about that in Ignite one day last week, that system of building that network. Do you have a Scripps practice partner? Do you have 3 Scripps practice partners? Now is a perfect time to grab a couple of people in your market center or the other market center or people from outside of our market centers and start practicing your scripts. So on June the 1st, trust me when I tell you, if you spend the next 6 weeks practicing, over and above doing your normal business, you will hit June 1st more brilliant than you ever thought you could be, right? And more confident than you ever thought you could be. So I really want you to utilize the time that we may be given here to set yourselves up for massive, massive success, because it is my opinion that we do not yet have to concede 2020. I am unwilling to concede the income goals that we set for our businesses in 2020. The time may come, depending on where this all goes, where I might wave the white flag a little on that, right? And start to look a little differently. But today I'm unwilling to yield and concede on those income goals. And I urge you to do the same. Let's just do everything we can do to set things up so that bam, on June the 1st, you have a summer and a fall like you don't even know what to do with yourself. Everyone keeps saying, oh, I can't wait to go on vacation. I want you to set your business up that vacation becomes like a foregone conclusion for you, a foregone thought for you. I said that incorrectly. That you don't even have time to think about vacation because you're handling so much business, right? That sets you up to end the year the way you thought you would had this not happened. Does that make sense to everybody? Work some of the, I told you all this morning, I want you to write an as if letter, right, to yourself for September the 1st. A lot of what I just gave you should be part of that as if letter, right? All righty. So that's my thought for you today at our end of day Q&A. So I'll open it up to any Q or A that you may have.
Hey, Rick, it's Paul.
Hey, Paul.
So Kimberly just posted a question to the mortgage partners about Chase. And Chase did announce today that they're not doing any loans under 700 FICO, and you have a minimum of 20% down. So basically, you got a lender backing away from the mortgage market.
Uh-oh. You're muted.
Paul.
Hold on, let me get Paul unmuted. I can't unmute you, Paul.
Okay, well, I'll take
How's
over
that?
then. We have found,
How's that?
we have
better?
not found that to be the case here. We're still doing 96.5% financing, 97, 95, 90. We still have mortgage insurance programs, no mortgage insurance programs. We have the full gamut. We're not seeing a pullback yet, except for credit scores are required to be a little bit higher in some instances. Some of those big jumbo products and no income verification products have been suspended. Otherwise, we're still lending. And rates are awfully good.
Clearly, love that. Love it, love it, love it. So, you know, guys, I will tell you right now is a time where I don't know that I would want my clients with someone other than the partners that we already have in place for you. And I don't say that to brown nose. I don't say that because that Karen or Paul or Nancy or Tammy or Bill asked me to say that. I say that because if I were a buyer today, I would look to my real estate professional to say, okay, so who's going to get me to the finish line? And I want you to be confident in the people that are on this call giving you that information, that they can get your folks to the finish line. So keep pushing, keep pushing. And you know what? Here's something else I'll just remind you of, because every once in a while I hear, oh yeah, you know, I worked with so-and-so one time 3 years ago and something went wrong and the loan skidded off the runway and I had to bring it someplace else. All right, so now it's time to get over that, right? And throw the loans back, right? Because no one can clear every single loan, right? And your mortgage partners are more than willing and able to step back from something if they really can't get it closed. Not only do they pass it back and forth to each other, but they'll also throw it to somebody outside of the market center if they really cannot do it. So let's not live in the, I tried that once 3 years ago and it didn't work out as well, because everyone can say that about every single thing, right? We'd never do open houses again if that were the way to do business. Make sense? What else? No other questiones? Awesome. Well, hey, Jeannie.
I have a question about rentals. Is there still the, you can't start eviction proceeding until May 1, and what is the 2-month forgiveness situation?
So great question. And so Governor Lamont offered a new executive order just, I think on Friday night per se, Friday night, that extends now the eviction period through July the 1st, right? So any of you who are landlords or have clients who are landlords or have clients who are tenants, the information is now no landlord can begin or continue eviction proceedings until minimally July the 1st. So that was extended by 60 days. There are also now mandatory grace periods for rent that was due on April the 1st. It's either a 60 or 90-day grace period. I can't remember which. I think it's 60-day grace period. And then rent due on May the 1st, also a 60-day grace period where you cannot charge late fees. You cannot call to harass them. What I would be doing as a landlord right now is calling and offering assistance and saying, what help do you need? What can you pay? How can we work this out, right? People who are going to come out of this less scathed are people who are having conversations and not just waiting with their hands out, right? Because you got to treat people like people in order to have people treat you like people back. And there's one more thing, Jeannie, that I cannot remember. There were 4 provisions to that executive order.
I just have one quick question. What about on new leases going forward? A question came up today. Let's say you're signing a lease on May 1st. They still have to give you first month's rent and 2 months security deposit, correct? Or is there a grace period on that?
And yes, thank you. And that's actually the 4th piece that I couldn't remember. So the landlord still gets to make a decision about how much security, right? If first month and 2 month security is their norm, then they can certainly accept that. However, the new executive order says that tenants who have more than 1 month security with the landlord can use anything over that 1 month as rent over the course of the next couple of months, right? So they're not permitted to utilize the entire security deposit unless the landlord permits that, right? But they are permitted anything over 1 month. They are kind of automatically permitted to simply call the landlord and say, I want you to take one of my month's security as April's rent or as May's rent. So that's the other piece of that. And with new leases or old leases, the rules are all the same. There's no provision for it just started this week or it starts in 2 weeks. The provisions are all the same. You still have to offer them grace periods, and you still have to offer the security as rent, anything over 1 month if they ask. That's not automatic, by the way. The tenant does have to ask. in order to do that. I will cut and paste the executive order and send it out to you. If you're curious about Governor Lamont's executive orders, if you go to ct.gov and type in governor's executive orders, I think we're up to executive order 7W. 7A is what started this whole thing a couple of weeks ago. We're up to 7W now. So there's a whole lot of executive orders. I will specifically take that language for landlords and tenants. Kimberly, if you just send me a text or an email to remind me, that would be great. Any other questions? Great. Thank you, Jeannie, because I meant to mention that and I forgot about it. So thank you for bringing that up. Anything else before we finish today?
Yes, Rick. I have a question. This is Hi.
Hi.
Hi. Some agents do not want to sign the COVID questionnaire form. They said their office told them that their legal services advised them not to sign it.
Yes, that is correct.
So is it okay to let them go without signing?
Nope. So here's the deal. If you have people living in the property, the seller is not able to waive the requirement for getting those forms signed.
Okay.
And we do that from the perspective not to make things difficult and not to not sell a house. We do that because we are determined to continue to keep your sellers and you and your buyer's agents and the buyers as safe as we possibly can. It's a responsibility that we take seriously. And so we are going to be unwavering on that. I will tell you that Kimberly and I over the weekend worked through a situation where it was a second showing, and the buyer's agent was told not to sign the disclosure form or any form, and so we worked out a situation where she brought the buyers, she waited out on the front porch, and the buyers went in with the seller and toured the house and came out and everything was fine. Then they wanted to go back and the buyers were, I'll use the word adamant. I'm not sure if that's really the right word. The buyers requested that the agent be allowed in the property. And so we went back to the agent and said, absolutely, you can come in the property, just sign the form. And she said, nope, sorry, my legal department in my company said I'm not allowed to sign the form. And we said, okay. What else can you do? Can you FaceTime live with the buyers? No, they really want me to be in there. We said, okay, you know what? We're going to push this back to the seller. I know where I stand on it. Let's push it back to the seller. And the seller came back and said, you know what? If we're all going to be in this together, then we're all going to be in this together. And I don't want those people in my house if they're not willing to sign the form. And as soon as we went back and said no for a third time, miraculously, the legal department in this person's company allowed her to sign the form. Right? And so I understand that that for some of you, it's a matter of taking a firmer stand than you are used to taking. It's okay, blame me. And if someone wants to talk to me, just pass them my way and I'll explain exactly why we're doing that. Right? All of your sellers, if they've received my letter and if they were in on my calls, your sellers know that we took these measures in order to protect them. And they knew that by them signing that form to allow physical showings, sometimes it may backfire and some showings may not happen because there will be some people who are unwilling to sign it. The other thing I've heard, just while we're on this topic, I want to just address it. One of the things that I've heard recently is, well, nobody else is asking anyone to sign any kinds of forms. Well, I know that to be false. Because I've received a form from just about every color sign that exists out there from most of you who have been asked to sign it in one way, shape, or form. So be careful. Don't get sucked into when someone says to you, well, I showed 5 other, 10 other properties and no one else asked me to do that. That's simply untrue. Right? People are asking people to sign things. They're asking people to sign different types of things. And I'll say this just one last time. If people would really read the form that we're asking them to sign, they'd be fools not to voluntarily sign it. Because what I'm asking them to do is make some disclosures and then I can't think of the word. The form allows all of us, all parties, to simultaneously hold each other harmless, right? And so if a buyer's agent doesn't want to sign it because their company said they shouldn't, my guess is that they never actually sent the company the form to read. The company issued a blanket statement that said, don't sign anything. Just like I said to you, except I said, don't sign anything until you send it to me. Let me read it and make sure that it doesn't put you or the market center in any danger, and then we'll go from there. My guess is that people have been just told not to sign anything, and that's the pushback you're getting. So I would ask the question, are you certain that they've signed, that they've actually read it, your general counsel? Who's telling you not to sign it? This actually protects you and the company you work for from anything that goes on, just like it protects me and my company and both buyer and seller. That's why we wrote it that way. So make sure that you understand that and make sure that you can explain it. And if you run into problems, the answer just might be that that showing doesn't happen at this point in time. And if people are upset about it, you can pass them to me and I'd be happy to talk with them with you. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yep.
I promise this will be over at some point. We won't have to sign these forms forever. However, until it's over, the people whose faces I'm looking at and your clients are just far too important to me to cave on that. And I think we need to just take a firmer stand and trust that we're doing the right thing. All right, guys. That's our 4:30 for the day. We are going to take a 1-minute break before Ignite. And so if you are joining us for Ignite, please hang on. We've got 1 minute as a quick break. So we'll start at, we're going to give ourselves 90 seconds. So 5:05, we will start Ignite. If you are not joining us for Ignite, we wish you a lovely good evening and we'll be back shortly. Alrighty. Good evening, everyone. I hope you are well. Those of us just joining, I hope you had a lovely day. Those of you who are holdovers from 4:30, welcome back. So we're going to dive right in because we have a whole lot to do today. Today is Monday, so I want to remind you that Wednesday, 30% more of your database is due to be called, right? So you took care of the first 30% our first week, and that was due last Wednesday. And so now this Wednesday, 48 hours from now, the second 30% of your database or better is due to be called with care calls, right? And so I want you to be really, really clear about making sure that you reach everybody. Reach everybody. I'm a little bit concerned that some of you are hearing that and not taking action on it. And I cannot encourage you enough to make sure that every single person in your database hears from you, just from the perspective of you saying, hey, just wanted to check in and make sure you were okay. Anything I can do for you. It can be a minute and a half conversation, but please make sure that you're hitting that. Okay, so we talked a lot about the pre-listing package. Well, let me ask this. Did you receive the pre-listing package that I sent? Because I got more than the average bear's amount of bounce backs on, okay, so I'm seeing faces like I smell garbage faces. So I think that maybe you did not. Okay, so it appeared to me that when I sent it, something occurred, and it may just be from, so some of you are saying yes, some of you not. It may just be that it was too large. So let me see. I have to think of another way to send it out to you because the PowerPoint I think is too big. So I will think through that and get that to you before we finish tonight. What I do want to make sure we start on and get through tonight, however, is the Mastering the Listing consultation, right? Hopefully you had some time to review some of those scripts that I gave you on whatever day that was last week. And for those of you who are just joining us, today, I also sent out earlier today to everyone in both market centers the scripts all over again. So you've now received it twice, and you can dive in and either print them at home or put them up on your screen or on a second screen or however you might choose to do that, because I do want you to really watch the words as we go through so that you're really you're understanding what we're talking about. So let's dive in with step number one, which is the confirm the appointment script. And again, as we talked about, you're going to have someone else confirm the appointment for you, right? It's not going to be you, because that would be weird. And then you get stuck having a conversation the night before. So make sure someone else is having that conversation for you, whether it's a colleague or your spouse or an adult child or someone that you actually pay, your administrative person is confirming those appointments for you. And so what I'd love to do is have a quick volunteer to just read through the confirm the appointment script. I want us to hear what these things sound like out loud. And yes, actually, who do I see? Hey, Silva, can you forward the email that I sent earlier to Niels? His email address is in the chat box. That way he has them for our session. And if anybody else needs them, pop your email address in the chat box and we can have them sent to you. Thank you, Silva. So who wants to start with running through the confirm the appointment script? We're going to move quickly through this because I want to get to the pricing and positioning by a certain time. So the first couple of steps we're going to be swift through, and yet I do want to make sure that we get through them. Come on, I know you can all read. Someone just has to read it out loud. I'm a very patient man. I could wait all evening. Or I could just spin through the list and choose somebody.
Rick, if you need somebody to read it out loud, I can do that for you.
Thank you so much, Stone. I appreciate that. Go for it.
Good afternoon, Mr. Seller. This is Stone Hamill calling from Annie Agent's office at Keller Williams Realty. How are you today?
I'm great, thanks.
Sorry, I just got a phone call. Great. I was just calling to confirm your appointment with Annie for tomorrow at 4 p.m. in our office at 123 Main Street. Annie's looking forward to meeting with you to discuss the sale of your home and wondered if there was anything specific that you wanted to be certain that she covered.
That's a great question. I mean, what's most important to me is that we kind of talk about the numbers. So I assume she's going to be doing that.
Okay, so we'll make sure to note the numbers. What else?
I don't know that I have anything else. That's kind of what's important to me.
Okay, perfect. So I'll make sure to let her know that.
Thank you.
We were also wondering if you were able to review Annie's pre-consultation package that was delivered to you.
I did, yes.
Okay. Did you have any questions with that?
Nope, not I can think of.
Okay. And were you able to get a chance to complete the seller homework pages?
We completed some of them, and we'll have to finish them up though.
Okay, that's perfect. Annie's going to go ahead and review those with you when you meet with her to list your home tomorrow.
Okay.
She's very excited. Annie's very excited to meet with you and looks forward to seeing you tomorrow at 4 p.m. In the meantime, if there's anything at all that we can do for you, please do not hesitate to give us a call, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you so much. All righty. Thank you, Sohn, for that. I appreciate that. And so just a couple of quick ahas. What did you notice about that script? I want you to understand it's written very specifically to cover a couple of things. What else?
You had the
So-
assumptive close.
Yeah, so there's absolutely that close in there, right? Annie will look to review those with you when she meets you to list your home tomorrow. What else? Do you notice?
Make sure to list the time again multiple times so they knew that it was at 4 o'clock.
Yeah, so we're going to make sure that they hear that a bunch of times from us, right? What else? What about the seller homework? What do you notice about asking that question?
She'll be reviewing it.
Yeah, indeed, right? So the script is she's going to review that with you when she meets you tomorrow to list your home. And we say that very specifically because we want to make sure that people actually do it. They do the homework. I can almost guarantee you that 75% of the time when someone calls the night before to confirm that appointment and says, did you do the homework that was in that package? And people say yes, that they are lying, right? They hang up the phone and yell through the house, honey, did you have that package that woman sent us? Because they're going to talk with us about that stuff in there. And we need to like look at that, right? So be clear that oftentimes that's just a reminder, and that's totally okay. As long as they have it done for me, for the agent when they arrive the next day, that's what we're looking for. Anything else that you notice?
The excitement,
Okay. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Bogdan.
the excitement. Annie is excited to meet with you.
Yeah, right. So people who are excited get the business. People who have passion get the business, right? And so if I was asking Stone to be the guy who was calling on my behalf and I was going to call on Stone's behalf, we would have a conversation around, look, if you're tired at the end of the day, maybe this isn't for you, because I want you to be up and I want you to be excited. I want you to, because people need to feel that energy right before I even get there. Did you have something, Stephanie? I saw you pop up as well. For some reason, we're not hearing you. You look unmuted, but we're not hearing you. Maybe type it in the chat. Okay, so we're going to cycle back to Stephanie if she has something pop up, and then we're going to move forward, right? I want you to, but I want you to understand that confirming, repeating her name. Yes, thank you. So we're going to repeat the time, we're going to repeat the name, be personal, be excited, be passionate about it, and then hit those points about the homework and about the assumptive close to make sure that you're making those points. And so that's kind of step 0. I call it step 1, but it really is step 0, because step 1 starts the next day when these folks walk into the office and now you're kind of meeting them for the first time. And so what I would love to do is have somebody read through setting the stage so that we can outline. If you remember, we talked a little bit about the first 30% of this. The first third of this is kind of a welcome, just a greeting. The second third is an agenda, and the fourth piece is a close. And so I want you to see if you can spot those 3 separate thirds of how this script works. Who wants to take that for us? You can see that Stone wasn't hospitalized by actually doing the reading, so anyone can do it. At least I hope Stone wasn't hospitalized. You're still with us, Stone, right? And feeling healthy and good?
We're doing great.
Okay, awesome. All right, John, thank you so much. Go ahead.
I'll do it.
Thanks.
Hello, Rick. How are you?
I'm spectacular, thanks.
Excellent, excellent. Did you find the office okay?
I did, thanks.
Great. Hey, before we get started, can I offer you something to drink, some coffee or some water?
You know what, I actually brought my own, so I'm good, thank you.
Perfect. Okay. Hey, we have a lot of exciting things to discuss today, so if it's okay with you, I'd like to jump right in and get started. Would that be okay with you?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Perfect. Well, Mr. Scott, I have a great deal of respect for the investment of your time. In fact, we only have 3 goals for today. Let's get right to it. Number 1, we're going to review your motivation to sell this house now and agree on a price that will cause it to sell. 2, we'll take a moment and I'll answer any questions you may have. And 3, we'll decide today whether you want to hire me. There may also be times when you may want...
John, just skip to
sorry.
the end of that. Hire me, and then does that make sense?
Sure. Does that make sense?
It does.
Excellent. So I have 3 critical questions for you. 1, do you really want to sell your house?
Yeah, I do.
Good, good. 2, are you willing to price your house to sell, or do you want it to sit on the market?
Well, I don't want it to sit on the market, and somehow this seems like a trick question. So I don't want it to sit on the market, and yeah, I think depending on our conversation around what those numbers are, that'll kind of bring me to where we need to be.
Good, good. No tricks here. We're going to agree on a price, and we'll get your house sold as quickly as it can be sold.
Got
3,
it.
do you want me to handle the sale for you?
Good question. I appreciate you asking it. I'm not sure I have enough info yet, but let's keep going and see where we get.
That makes perfect sense. Let's keep the discussion going, and let's move on.
All right, perfect. Thank you, John. I appreciate that. So talk to me about some ahas that you have. I want to make sure that you're hearing some of the really important pieces of this script, because I will tell you, as I mentioned on whatever day we were last together, Friday, if you will use this script 3 times out of 10, you will get to the bottom and ask that question, and the answer will be yes. And you've now fast forwarded through a whole lot of stuff to get to a contract signing so that you can circle back and have a conversation around price and positioning, right? And again, I know some of you are hearing that with like this uneasy feeling in your stomach. I will tell you, trust me, and trust if there's anybody else who utilizes this script, can you unmute and just verify what I'm saying to be true? 3 times out of 10 or thereabouts, if you're brave enough to close at the bottom of this first page after 3 or 4 minutes of having them be in front of you, that you actually get yeses a bunch of times. Anybody using this and can verify what I'm saying? Well, that makes me feel very lonely.
Always keep closing, Rick.
Yeah, indeed, right? And so, so you'll just have to trust me, because I thought we'd have other people who we could trust on.
Confirm that it works also. It's feeding time at the zoo here, so there's a lot of barking, so I don't want to unmute. But yes, I use it all the time with great success. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Donna. I appreciate that. So what are your ahas? What do you hear by each of these 3 pieces? Did you see the first third, the middle third, and the last third, right? You kind of saw where that was. Talk to me about the first third. Any big ahas? There's not a whole lot to dive in there, right? What I want you to underline and what I want you to make sure you recognize is we have a lot of exciting things to discuss today. So if it's okay with you, I'd like to jump right in and get started. Right? That's written that way, not to shortcut any personal chit chat, but it's written that way because most of the people that have now left their home and left their kids at home to come meet you in the office, they're not necessarily interested in being there all evening, right? And so you diving in, and you ask permission, if it's okay with you, I'd like to jump right in and get started. It's just respectful of their time. People say a lot to me, well, I spend time up front building rapport. And I want you to be really cautious around that, right? Because there's a difference between building rapport and building business rapport, right? Building rapport is not, oh, those are such cute shoes. Where'd you get them? How are you? You know, how you said on the phone that you were going on vacation soon. Tell me all about that, right? And 20 minutes now have gone by and you haven't gotten down to the business at hand, right? I will tell you that if you did that to me, I think I would have stopped you certainly before 20 minutes to say, you know, I am so sorry to make it sound like I'm in a rush, but can we get started, right? And I want you to recognize, I would say it to your face, but most people won't say it to your face. They'll just feel it. And that doesn't get things off on the right foot, right? So I want you to be clear about having that business rapport, which for most people is, let's jump in. If you have people who want to chit chat, someone could very well say, oh, you know, I'd love to get started, but if we could just talk about X first, right? And then go and follow their lead and talk a little bit about X and then pull it back, right? What else do you notice? Go ahead, Dee.
So I look at the middle part as sort of the agenda, setting up the agenda for the meeting. And then the before you go forward, you know why I call it the agenda piece? What?
You know who gave me that word?
Me?
You, yes, that's correct. That's why I call it the agenda. Because Dee's the queen of agenda when it comes to listing meetings.
And then the last three questions are sort of rhetorical, if you will, for me when I take that on, that kind of thing on. You're not really waiting for an answer. You just kind of go 1, 2, 3. You kind of run through it so that they kind of get a feel for where we're going. Does that make sense?
It does, right? And so you can use those last three questions a bunch of different ways, right? And so the way that John used them with me, or the way that Dee just described, you get to, there's a reason you end with, do you want me to handle the sale for you, right? Because that to me is kind of the stopping point. And the answer to that, I would look for an answer to that one, simply because that's going to bring us to the next step. If the answer is no, let's check it out and see what happens, then we move on to the next step in the process. If the answer is yes, well then you shuffle things through, get to the contract, and move it forward that way. I want to just spend a little time on the agenda piece that Dee mentioned, right? Know why you're there. You're there to review motivation and sell the house now and agree on a price that will cause it to sell. So I'm going to have a conversation, if not done already, about what's motivating you to sell this house. You've asked this question in a pre-qualification conversation on the phone before you set up the appointment, just by the way, right? We're going to verify and review the motivation before we move forward. And then the second piece is important. We'll agree on a price that will cause the house to sell. You're planting these seeds about what we're here to do. We're not here for you to hear my opinion, right? It doesn't say that. It says what we're here to do is agree on a price that will cause your house to sell. That's very specific language and sends a very specific message that I encourage you not to shy away from. The second piece is as important. How long does it say we'll take to answer questions?
5 minutes.
Right? What does it say? It doesn't say 5 minutes. What does it say?
A moment.
It says that we're going to take a moment. We're going to take a moment and answer any questions. Now, does that mean if they have 20 minutes worth of questions, you're going to invalidate their questions and say, I'm sorry, we only have a moment for that? No, of course not, right? But the seed you're planting is, we had the pre-listing package delivered. Most of your questions are going to be answered in that pre-listing package, and anything that's not, which is maybe a smidge, we'll just take a moment and I'll get those answered for you. The other piece, the other reason that it's a moment to answer all of your questions is because if you will allow the process to go from step number 1 here through the contract signing, most of their questions get answered through the process. And so if someone is going to stop you and say, no, I have a quick question, great, let them ask the question. And for the most part, my answer through the process would be, that is an excellent question, Donna. I am so excited you asked that. We are going to get to that in just about a minute or two. If you'll just kind of put a pin in that, and we're going to get to that shortly, right? And we move them through the process. That way you don't get thrown off the process by those questions. So just jot them down and you get to them later. And number 3 is probably the most important piece of this entire set the stage script. And that is, we'll decide today whether you want to hire me. You are being very clear right up front what the intended goal of this meeting is. And for some of you, that's a terrifying statement. What I would encourage you to do is just practice it. Practice, 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 because you being clear that we're going to decide this evening whether or not you hire me or not should not terrify you. It should not terrify you. It should excite you, because you've now given yourself and the seller a very clear directive about what we're here to do. If you don't let them know, some of you struggle at the end, right? I've done rehearsals with many of you and hope to do rehearsals with many more of you as we are able to, where so much is so good until you get to the point of you're out of script. And what I've noticed with rehearsals is that agents have 2 common issues. Number 1, they don't close. So they run out of script and they go back and start talking about things that they don't need to start talking about because they're unwilling to say, any questions before we sign the contract? Is there anything else that is unclear before we get started? Right? They're unwilling to utilize those closes to help the seller say yes. I want you to remember one thing about closes. Closes are not manipulative language to get someone to do what they don't want to do. And a lot of times in our heads, we think that closes somehow are these wicked tools of the sales trade that somehow strong-arm people into doing things that they don't want to do. Here's what I have learned in my career. You can't make someone do something they don't want to do. You're not that powerful. Instead, closes simply allow people to take the next step that they are already interested in taking anyway. They're just not sure how to do it or when to do it. So when you ask those questions, when you put those closes out, you're just helping them tie it in a nice little bow. Does that help? So make sure you set the agenda and make sure the agenda is clear that what we are here to do is not chit chat. We're not here to talk about fancy brochures and flyers. We're not here to talk about even the numbers as much as we are here to make a decision about whether or not we're going to go into business together. And when you set that expectation that clearly, it is hard for the seller to forget how confident you sound right at the beginning here, because confidence is what conveys some of these lines. Make sense?
Yep.
Will you practice them and do them?
We'll try.
No, there is no try. There is do or do not.
We shall.
My friend Yoda said that. Right? So be clear that if some of this language starts to freak you out a little bit, all you need to do is practice it. Practice it, practice it, practice it, so that when you're in front of a seller, it just comes out naturally. Okay, so the very next page in our scripts is the difference between a fiduciary and a functionary. We are not going to read this one through together. Again, you were supposed to read it through before we met tonight. For those of you who did read it beforehand, what did you notice about it? Any words that you particularly liked in the discussion? How does it describe what you do as a consultant?
it's our job to ask questions and listen and understand.
Yeah, so first and foremost, it's about listening. It's about understanding. It's about question asking, right? It talks about a special relationship of trust and of confidence, about responsibility. It talks about their wants and needs. It talks about recommending solutions. It talks about satisfying and exceeding their wants and needs, right? It talks about education. It talks about making great business decisions. There are so many great words and phrases in that paragraph that even if you choose not to utilize this, because some people simply have kind of bullet points of fiduciary and functionary on like a PowerPoint slide or on a document that they might show. And that serves the purpose equally as well. This is kind of lengthy and wordy. However, I want you to understand the words that are used here that are used for a reason, because when you really start to think about them all, they convey something very, very important, right? When you kind of string together all those words and phrases that I just read out loud, like who wouldn't want to be in business with someone who's going to do all that, right? And that's the main difference between that functionary and fiduciary. And the script itself kind of outlines, most people behave this way. This is how I choose to behave, which makes better sense for you. So it's like they're already saying, oh, I don't want that whole agenty sounding thing. That consultant thing sounded good. Oh, great. Well, because that's what I do, right? You get to bring that back on you. So it's just one more way to help them see you as different from the pack, from the pack. Make sense?
Yep.
Excellent. All right. The next step is that needs analysis. And so on that next page, the needs analysis is designed to help the seller tell you the 3 most important things about the sale of their home according to their kind of brain dump, right? And so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to, who do I see? Donna, would you do me a favor and just unmute and be my seller real quick?
I sure will, unless they start barking, and then I'll cut it off. Go ahead.
And that's okay. Sellers sometimes have barking dogs as well. Sometimes they have barking children. Who knew? All right, so we're just, Donna and I are just going to run through this real quick because I want you to hear what this sounds like and take some notes because I want you to pay attention to the ahas. So Donna, on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being very desirable and 1 being not terribly desirable at all, what one thing would need to happen to make the sale of your property a real 10 for you?
Well, I'd like to get some sort of comfort level with the fact that people aren't going to just pop by. I'd like to have some notice so I can prepare the house properly.
Got it. So notice for showings, is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yeah, yes.
Okay. And can you be a little more specific about that? What kind of notice makes sense in your world?
2 hours? Would that be too extreme?
You tell me, and then we can kind of talk a little bit about the pros and cons of it.
I could get everything put together and then get out of the house. So yeah,
Okay.
if I could get 2 hours, that'd be great.
2 hours.
More is better, but 2 hours.
Got it. So minimally 2 hours. And why is that important to you, Donna?
Well, as I mentioned, the dogs, so I've got to get them all gathered away, clean up a little bit, and then I'm assuming that it's better if I'm not here.
It is, yes, correct.
Yeah. So just so I can do that, that'd be great.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for that. And so if we added a second item to that list, what additional thing would need to happen to make your experience like a 10 plus?
Let's see. Well, we'll talk about the price a little bit. I do want to make sure I get, a number that's going to be comfortable for me to get to my next move.
Got it. And what is that comfort number, Donna? Could you quantify that for me?
Sure. Well, I think we may have talked about it a little bit. I'm looking for something in like the 600,000 range.
Got it. And just so I'm clear, is that 600,000 net to you or $600,000 as a sale price where then fees and expenses would come off of that?
As a sale price.
As a sale price. Okay, so gross.
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. And what's important to you about that $600,000 number?
Well, I have my eye on a property already in Virginia, so I know what the numbers look like.
Got it. You seem excited about that property in Virginia.
I am.
Yeah.
It's my forever house, I have a feeling.
Oh man. Wow. Okay. Well then we gotta get pedaling as fast as we can to make sure that you get that forever house. And so Donna, one last thing, if you could add one more thing to that list to really just send the transaction kind of over the moon, make it a real 10 plus plus, what would be that one last thing?
Well, pretty much what you just said, to be able to get it done quickly so that I can get that house.
Got it. And would you do me a favor? Could you quantify quickly for me? What does that look like for you?
I'd really love to have an offer like in the next 30 days.
Okay. And just so I'm not putting words in your mouth, tell me why is that important to you?
So I can put my offer in or, sign the contract on the other property.
Okay. So same reason. Got it. And so Donna, thank you so much for sharing those three things. I want to just spend another minute of time on them. If you could only have one of those three, could you tell me which of those three is the most important to you?
The most important to me, that's difficult because they're all pretty real. I would say to get it done as quickly as possible.
Okay, so get it done as quickly as possible is the most important.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's that 30-day potential close. Got it. And so if we got it done in 30 days.
Potential offer, I'd love if it had closed in 30 days, but an offer, an acceptable offer in 30 days would be great.
Got it. Okay. So an acceptable offer within 30 days. And if we didn't quite hit that 600,000 number in order to make that happen that fast, and perhaps the real qualified buyer who's willing to pay as much as anybody else is needed a little less notice than the 2 hours, you might be willing to overlook the other two if we really hit hard on that first one.
I'll do my very best. Yes.
Well, there you go. That's all anyone can ask. And so at the risk of beating this horse nice and dead, if you could only have two, which one would you add? Which one would be number two for you? Of the two that are left, price or the notice?
Oh, that's tough. That's tough. I guess this will surprise you. It would be the notice.
The notice, okay.
But let's really try for the price as well.
Indeed, I hear you. So thank you so much for sharing all that with me. And just to kind of repeat for you, what I'm hearing you say is that what really makes this transaction a massive win for you is if we could find you a buyer within that 30-day range where showings allow at least 2 hours worth of notice for you so that you can get the dogs set and the house ready for the buyers, and then make yourself scarce for the showing. And then lastly, hitting that $600,000 number to be able to have you grab that forever house in Virginia. Yeah. Does that sound accurate?
It does. That would be great. Can we do that?
You know what? We can certainly do that together, right? And so the rest of our conversation will ultimately be built around how can we make decisions together to make sure that these three things fall into place.
Okay.
And so let me ask you this, Donna. If each of those three things showed up and I could help point you in a direction to get you there, would that sound like a partnership that made sense for us to pursue?
Absolutely. I'm very excited. If we can make this happen, then yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. Yeah. Excellent. Well, I'm excited to get us started on that. All right. And so that's kind of I think I went off script because I kept looking down and couldn't find my place. So I apologize for going off script, guys. But you saw that process, right? You saw the process of helping Donna come up with the three things that are really most important to her. And the reason that we go through this exercise with you live is because the order in which Donna gave those things to me was not the order that most of us assume people are going to give it, right? Most of us assume that the most important thing for a seller is money. And I will tell you that when you make that assumption, you oftentimes make the wrong assumption and start pedaling down a path that is not the most important path for the seller. And so asking them those three things and then asking them to go and reorder them in a prioritization exercise, crazy important. Ultimately, what Donna just told me was that she wants to focus on a 30-day sale, right? A 30-day sale comes with a different positioning in terms of a price than a 90-day sale or a 180-day sale does. Now, we didn't have that discussion here because we're going to save that for a little later. I'm just gathering the information up front. But understand that when we get to the numbers portion of this, and Donna starts to push back on me a little bit, and she wants to push the number a little higher than maybe what the market is telling her to, I now have some ammunition. Did you hear how she gushed about that forever house? She even called it a forever house. That's like golden ammunition. Because now I know exactly what's driving her to make this decision. And so when she says she wants to put the house on the market for $695, when all indications point to $649, right, or whatever the numbers are, we get to go back and have a quick conversation around that. So Donna, I appreciate that, that thought. I'm curious, how does the number that you just mentioned reconcile with a 30-day offer? I'm wondering how those two things reconcile. Can you help me see how that makes the best sense to have someone show up quickly, right? And so now Donna's going to either explain it or not. She may have a thought, she may not. And what I find is that when you get to bring some of these things back to them, it challenges because oftentimes without a challenge question, sellers want a big number and all the things that Donna put on the table at the same time, right? I want to have ice cream sundaes every single night as well. And I also prefer weighing 159 pounds. And so I don't get to have both. I don't get to have ice cream sundaes every night for dinner and 159 at the same time. So the number, that one number for me is important as a number, and it's going to inform some of the decisions I make about activities or paths forward. See how that's the same thing? Any questions on that quick needs analysis? Pretty simple, right? Will you use it?
Yeah. Yes.
All right, the next step. What time is it? Okay, good. We're right where we need to be. So the next step is some quick market conditions questions. Because if you look at the bottom of that script, the needs analysis script, it says, if it's okay with you, I'd like to begin to discuss the current state of the real estate market. So again, permission-based transition statements. If it's okay with you, I'd like to discuss the state of the real estate market. And when they say, yeah, that'd be great, we move into a market conditions conversation. And a market conditions conversation has everything to do with a brain dump for them first. And so what you have in front of you are, 2, 4, 7 questions that I am going to encourage you never to skip. Because you need to know what they're thinking and why before you start having conversations around the specifics about their home. If you skip this step, you now don't really know where they're coming from. You don't really know what they know. You don't, or what they think they know, right? Depending on the seller. And it's really far more difficult to have an objective, grounded conversation if you have no idea what's in their head. So I like to look at this form as like the juror prep form, right? No attorney puts a juror on the stand without having a massive amount of preparation work done with that particular juror. They want to know everything that juror knows and everything that juror does not know. Did I say juror? I meant witness. Sorry. I'm mixing my legal metaphors. See, it's too bad I wasn't doing a sports metaphor because I'm clearly awesome at those. If those of you who were on the calls last week, I did 2 awesome sports metaphors. And so it's the attorney preparing the witness for the witness stand, right? The witness doesn't get to go on the stand unless the attorney knows, what they don't know, and where they might go under pressure. These questions kind of give you that opportunity with your seller. What do you know? What don't you know? And what might this look like under pressure? So let's run through them really quickly. And I'll hey, Dee, would you mind, do you have them in front of you? For some reason, you're not unmuting.
Okay, I'm here. Yes.
You have them in front of you? Yeah, so if you could run through those questions, I'll just be your seller. And I just want everyone to hear the questions and hear what some of the answers could be.
Okay. So Rick, before we get into the facts that I have prepared for you to review, I'm curious to know what is it that you have heard or seen recently about the housing and financial market?
Well, I've heard that the financial market is kind of crazy volatile right now. You know, we were up really high, now we're down really low. And frankly, I'm not really sure I've heard much about the housing market. I'm assuming that it's kind of doing the same thing, that up and down. So that's what I can say about that.
Okay. Can you tell me a little, can you talk a little about that? What specifically have you heard?
Well, as it relates to the housing market, the only thing I've really heard is that I think a neighbor of mine sold recently, and they were excited to sell. So I'm assuming that they got a good number for the house. You know, other than that, I don't have many more specifics. Okay, so
where else did you hear? Where did you hear that news then? Just from the neighbor? Anybody else?
From the neighbor, and then from the news. I mean, from the the general information I'm getting from kind of watching the news.
Okay. And was that information you were speaking of more national in scope, or was it local?
Well, I'm a big CNN guy, so I'm thinking it was probably more. I think it was probably more national. I don't know if they were specifically speaking of Connecticut.
Okay, so national perspective. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. And how do you believe that these realities might affect you and your property?
Well, I'm kind of hoping if there's volatility, I'm hoping we can kind of catch it on the upswing and do as well as the neighbors seem to.
Oh, I can appreciate that. Okay. Any other thought on current market conditions before we press forward?
Nope. I think that's about all I have.
Okay. And lastly, do you have any specific questions about the market so we can be sure that we cover them?
No, I don't think I do. I think I'm anxious to know what the numbers are around the house, and again, hoping that whatever benefits there are in the market, we can figure out a way to utilize them to my advantage.
Okay, fantastic.
Right. So again, thank you, Dee. Not hard questions, right? And yet they allow an opportunity for the seller to just kind of talk. There's no right or wrong, right? And if you noticed what Dee did when she asked them and I gave the answer, she didn't poke and prod at the answers. She didn't give an opinion about the answers. The answer wasn't right. It wasn't wrong. She didn't make a squishy up face and say, what are you talking about? She didn't do any of those things. She simply listened, because the whole idea of these questions is brain dump, right? If there was something specific that Dee needed a little bit more information on, such as if I said something about the house around the corner, and there was a relevance to Dee knowing a little bit more information around, you know, which house around the corner, was it listed, you know, was it a for sale by owner? So she could maybe prompt or prod a little bit on something like that if she thought it was relevant to where we were headed. But for the most part, what Dee did was exactly what this is designed to do, which is just allow the seller to get off his chest whatever might be on his chest, right? And also help the seller recognize, I think the most important question here is, whatever you know or think you know, where did you hear it, and was it local or national in scope? Because a lot of times people hear things about what's going on in Boston and think that for some reason that the Boston market is the same as our market here in Fairfield County, and so let's just put the two together, right? My sister sold up in Boston and things are going gangbusters, so we can really push the envelope here. And we get to hear that and then address it by asking, was that national or local in scope? And so they get to then kind of answer their own question. Well, no, that was actually kind of local. And then if they still don't get it, Dee gets to ask later on, how do you believe that these realities might actually affect you and your home? And so then she gets to understand, does the seller really still think that market conditions in Boston are going to benefit them here? Or does the seller come around to say, well, you know, I guess knowing that that's Boston, it might be tough to kind of expect the same thing here. However, I'm hoping we can do the best that we can do. Great. So does this make sense to everybody? Again, it's the idea of just allowing them that brain dump. There's one thing I want to point out from a scripts perspective to you, and that is the very first line where it says, before we get into the facts that I have prepared to review. That's a really important word in that very important line. It doesn't say, I want to get into the opinions. I want to get into the, let's get a dartboard out and throw a dart and see what we hit and everything's okay. It says these are facts, right? And facts are indisputable. Facts they just are. They're objective. And so we want to start making that point right up front to make sure that there's no issues. Now, the next two pieces of this, in order for us to get through the pricing piece, I am going to ask your permission to skip the next two market conditions graphs and do them on Wednesday first thing, so that we can, because I don't want to get almost to the pricing when I told everyone we're going to do pricing tonight and then not get there. So would you be okay? I can see Michelle and Nancy and Velma and Mike and Kim and Gio and Dan and Bo and Stardust and Dee. Are we good? Can we skip these next two graphs and kind of do them on Wednesday? You'll be okay with that? All right.
Great. Can I ask you a question?
Of course.
What will be your answer if the seller asks you your opinion about the market?
Right here at this moment in time?
Yes.
And so role play that with me. Is that Jackie?
Yeah.
Yeah. Role play that with me. So where would that come up, Jackie? During these questions?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you, any thoughts, any other thoughts that you have on the current market conditions before we press forward?
Well, I'd like to hear your opinion because you're an expert on the local market. So I would like to see what is your opinion about the market before I move forward with my decision to sell the house.
Got it. And I so appreciate that, Jackie. And I appreciate that you're looking for my opinion. Let me ask a quick question. Would you agree that the facts that we're going to discuss shortly are ultimately objective enough to base a decision on?
Well, I hope so.
Yeah, me too. And so what I'd like to do is kind of just put a quick pin in your question, and let's get through the facts and the objective market data. And then if you still have a thought or a question around that, I'll be happy to answer it.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. So the answer to Jackie's question, and it's a great one, is at that moment in time, it's just deflection, right? You're going to hear the answer, you're going to hear the question, and you're not going to answer it. Many of you fall victim in a spot like that, and I so appreciate Jackie asking this question. You fall into the seller's trap. Because when the seller asks your opinion, especially right then and there before we've even put facts on the table, many of you think, okay, well, now's when I get to show them how much I know. And trust me when I tell you that's not what they're interested in. They're interested in your assistance in helping them interpret facts. Your opinion doesn't belong anywhere on here, right? That's how we get ourselves in trouble when we start giving our opinions versus having them make sense out of the facts. So thank you for asking that, Jackie, because it's an important question. Deflection is a skill that you have to get good at. It's kind of like in the middle of some of this. I can remember being in the field, and in the middle of a consultation, someone would blurt out, and so remind me what your commission is again? Wait, that's not what's on these pages, right? And yet, here's what's real. Sometimes sellers ask questions that aren't written on the pages. And so what you have to get better and better at is hearing those questions and knowing that not every question asked of you gets an answer right then and there, right? And so you have that question asked of you, and you get to deflect that again. That's a great question, Dan. I am so glad you put that on the table. We are actually going to get there. If you'll just give me a moment, I'm going to jot that down. Commission. And if we don't answer it in the next 5 or 10 minutes or so, make sure you bring that back up, right? And so we're just going to utilize that skill of deflecting it, kicking it down, kicking the can down the road a little bit, because the process of all of this will answer that question. And I'll be damned if I'm going to talk about my commission before we talk about the facts that drive the market, right? Because it's not relevant yet. Go ahead, Dan, do you have a question?
Yeah, just one question. I know you said you're going to get to this later about charts. When I listened to this lecture of yours once before, we could get these charts from the shared drive or the P drive. Can we do that now from home?
So depending on the graphs you're talking about, some of them are available and some of them are not. Brokermetrics is one of them, and that you'd have to have one of us run from the office and email to you. And again, somebody is in each office each day, so we're happy to do that. Just let us know. And then the other, I'm going to show you on Wednesday how to run your own numbers so that you can do that from home with the MLS. Okay. I'm only encouraging 2 graphs nowadays. It's the Brokermetrics supply and demand graph and some kind of a templated graph or chart showing month supply of inventory. All those other ones we used to use, I've moved past. Like the heat map I don't use anymore. The median sale price I don't use anymore, because what I found is it's got to be too much information, and fast and short is better for most sellers. And we'll talk more about that on Wednesday. Sure.
All right.
All right, so let's do this. Let's dive right now into the SPA. No, the piece we skipped were just 2 graphs that would show the seller the macro version of the market. It's supply and demand from Brokermetrics, which kind of shows them a 10,000 foot view from space of what the movement in the general marketplace is, and that's the town, right? Because you're going to run that by town per se, and then you're going to show them something a little more specific that's run by town, and then price point, each price point in the town with the month supply of inventory. And again, we're gonna tackle that on Wednesday, so we can spend the last half hour together really diving through the SPA. So we've asked their questions, the market conditions questions. We've given them 2 quick 4-minute discussions on macro view of what's happening in the market, so that they can get an idea of what all of that looks like, because it lays the foundation for them to now see what's going on specifically with their property. And so what I'd love to do is just kind of run through this with you. You all have it in front of you. I want to read through it once, just quickly through top to bottom without stopping it so you hear what it sounds like, and then go back and kind of explain the process. And then we can go back and ask some more questions. So here's what the SPA sounds like. And Kimberly, would you do me a favor and just when I need the seller to give me a response, just give me a response? All righty, so Kimberly, do you have any other questions on the economics and market conditions data that we just discussed?
No, you're pretty clear about it, yes.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. Hopefully the data itself was clear, right? And
yes.
So no questions on that? Okay, perfect. So if it's all right with you, what I'd like to do is move to a more specific version of this discussion and really focus in on how all of this affects you and your home. Would that be all right?
Perfect. Mm-hmm.
So in order to be successful and obtain the result that you're looking for, right, a sold sign, I would like for us to spend a little time examining the market through the eyes of both the buyer and the bank's appraiser. How does that sound?
Yes. Okay.
Excellent. And so first, what I want to do is take a look. These are the best 3 comparable properties to yours that have sold in Wilton in the past 3 months. Here, 1, 2, and 3. I'm curious, Kimberly, have you seen any of these 3 homes?
No, actually, but none of these are in my neighborhood. And, my neighborhood's a little bit different than, like, I live in Japan versus downtown. I'm just curious, do you make any allowances for that?
I do, and so we're just gonna step out of this read real quick, because if Kimberly lived in Japan, I would never bring her comps that weren't in Japan, right? For those of you who live and work in areas that neighborhood actually matters, right? You're going to keep that tight. And so for purposes of just this read through, Kimberly, assume that the properties are in Japan.
Yep. Okay. So yeah, these I walked through one during the open house. Yeah.
Oh, good. Good. And which one did you walk through?
Yes, this one on Linnell.
Okay, got it. And so the one here for that sold for $745, you've been inside of that one.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Excellent. And so just take a moment and review. If you've been inside that one, maybe you need a few minutes less on that one, but take some time and just kind of do a quick read through of these properties. And again, I want you to take a look at them through the buyer's eyes. Just take a moment and do that if you would.
Okay. So I think for the most part, you did a great job, with the style and the area, the neighborhood. This one here, I have a 2-car garage and they have a 1-car garage. And I also just updated my kitchen.
Yes, no, you certainly did. And so let me address that in a moment if I could. Before we get to the specifics, if you had to buy one of these 3 properties today, again, remember you're looking at these through the eyes of a buyer. If you had to buy one of these 3 properties, which one would you choose?
Oh well, definitely this one. Yes, definitely property B. Mm-hmm.
So property B, and can you tell me why did you choose that one?
Because it was close to the water and the bathrooms and the kitchens have all been updated recently.
Got it. So
looking at the pictures.
Okay. So location and some property upgrades. And without putting words in your mouth, it sounds to me like you're making that choice because for the price, you kind of got some more, but it sounded like a value a decision for you, knowing the location and the upgrades were important. Would you agree with that?
Because walking into the house here at this one here, I don't have to do anything. It's walk in, and it had more to offer than the other 2.
Got it.
Because I didn't have to do the kitchen or the bathroom. They're already done, and they're about the same price. So
yes, exactly right. Perfect. And so Kimberly, would you agree that this property and really each of these 3 properties is basically comparable to your home? No, knowing that there's not going to be another home that is exactly like yours, or else that would be your home, right? And so would you agree that these 3 are basically comparable to your home with a difference here or there.
Yes, I would agree to that. Mhm.
Excellent. And so moving from that, I want to show you, this is a list of all the current competition in this range, right? And I've run the competition in this range from 900 to $1 million, so a full $100,000 price range, right?
Mm-hmm.
I forget what we said the prices were before, so now just pretend they're in the middle of nines.
Yeah,
all right?
Got it.
I think I said sevens before, but then you moved it to Japan, and so I have to jump it up a little. So as a reminder, Kimberly, the main data point from the market conditions information we discussed earlier was the word precise. Do you remember that?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Being precise, right. And so when you combine that, the idea of being precise, with all the comparable data that we just reviewed, where do you feel you should position your property on this list of actives to outperform any and all of these properties for sale?
Eek. Well, I want to be closer to the $1 million mark.
Okay, and can you talk with me about that?
Right. So, we really need to get a certain amount for the house so that we can move on to our next home.
Understood.
And so, doing something closer to 9, if I put it on at 9, that means I'm going to get offers in the 8s. And I don't want that because I want to get them closer to 975, $1 million.
Understood. So knowing that, Kimberly, if you had to choose a position off of this list, what position would you choose?
Well, I guess I wouldn't want to go lower than 975.
Okay. And so is that the position that you're choosing?
Well, I mean, you're the subject matter expert. What do you think about that price?
So I appreciate that question. And again, I don't want to get into objection handling right now, right? So
Okay,
let's just agree, because I want to go back and then step it through, and then we'll objection handle on the tail end.
Yeah. So yes, I think 975 would be a fair price for the house.
Perfect. So with that, Kimberly, and knowing that, and again, so guys, the comps were like in the mid 9s. So Kimberly's going to pick 975. If I really wanted her at 949 or 959 or whatnot, from a percentage perspective, am I all that upset with 975? No, I see. To me, I think sometimes we get so wrapped up in what we think the right number is that we can't see the forest for the trees, right? 949, 959, 975. That's all in that ballpark. That to me is a win, right? I might go back and ask Kimberly some more questions. Like if Kimberly's motivation was what Donna's motivation was, where she wanted to have a sale in 30 days, I might cycle back to say, so at that number you chose, Kimberly, I'm curious, do you think that aligns with your desire to find a qualified buyer in the first 30 days? Right? And then Kimberly has to kind of go through, well, I'm not sure. Well, let's talk about that, right? So buyers buy based on the same way you demonstrated, by finding the best value, right? At that number, do you believe that your home will show the buyer the best value for their shopping dollar based on the rest of the competition, right? And we get to have a discussion and a conversation. Maybe Kimberly doesn't know the answer to that. Maybe we have to go to the MLS and start popping some of these houses on the screen so that she can get some more information to make a better decision. But you see how the process works, right? The through line of the process. Now, is it true that sellers sometimes don't just simply agree with the numbers that you've put on the table? And that sometimes we have to go back once or twice or 77 different times to help objection handle some of that. Right? That's real, right? It wasn't just me. Was I the only person who ever experienced that? Well, maybe you all should be teaching this and I should be listening, because I always found that many sellers even when the facts were very clear on the table, decided they wanted to do something a little different, right? You heard Kimberly start to go there, right? Before I adjusted the conversation. She started to go to, well, we need more money, right? Does that have anything to do with the value of the property? It does not, right? And so one of the things that from an objection handling perspective that we're going to work through is how do we help the seller recognize that what they need, what they want, what the neighbor got, all those kinds of things has nothing really to do with the objective facts that we're laying in front of them. And part of the reason I like this system so much is because it strips away so much of the subjective, right? Some of you are still doing more of a CMA version of this, and the CMA version of this is let's find sold comps, let's find active comps, let's find pending comps, let's find some things that are expired. I think, and the other issue I see pop up more times than not is you're not bringing just 3 sold comps. Some of you are working off of 5 sold comps or 8 sold comps. Why do we need to limit it to 3 sold comps, like the best 3 sold comps?
It's too much data is going to confuse the seller anyway.
Exactly right. It confuses the seller, and it also tends to confuse who?
Me.
Yes, right? We confuse ourselves with all that data. Go ahead, Kim.
It's also what an appraiser does.
And it's also, we already set the stage that we're going to be looking at this through the eyes of a buyer and an appraiser. And so if all of a sudden we bring 7 different things out, that's not what an appraiser does. The appraiser finds the best 3 sold comps, right? And so we want to limit the information to help the seller make the best decision possible. And knowing that we're going to ask them to make it, we want to be certain that we give them the right data. I'm oftentimes asked, how can you expect a seller to make this decision? Well, okay, so I gave Kimberly 3 sold comps that she herself then said were basically comparable to her home. By the way, did you add that word in when I said it? Basically? One of these days I'll fix this script, because I do believe that putting the word basically comparable in there saves you from the tit for tat that sometimes goes on. Oh no, it's not exactly like my home. Well, of course it's not exactly like your home, right? We don't compare your home to your home. That's the only one that's exactly like your home, right? In that case, it's not a box of Cheerios, right? Many of you have heard me talk about my Cheerios script with making houses a commodity, right? Like Cheerios. Well, one of the ways that the houses are not like Cheerios is that it's not the same box over and over and over again, right? There are differences, and everyone has to recognize that there are some differences. So I gave Kimberly 3 comps, one that sold for $739, one that sold for $747, and one that sold for $759. If those are the best 3 sold comps and they're basically comparable to her home, and that's how an appraiser is going to justify a loan, does anyone not see how we've pretty much given her the answer? Right? You don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out that right around that 950 number is probably where this property comes in. Does everyone agree with that? And so when you give them the list of actives, what they're really doing is taking the data, the objective sold data that says this property is probably valued in that 950 range, and they're going to make a choice about the positioning. If it was Donna or Donna's motivation was driving this, she may decide that 950-ish number is exactly where she wants to be, because she knows that at 949, she may attract competition for the property and get herself out in that 30-day period of time, right? Kimberly's looking to maximize the dollars instead of the time, and so she was willing to decide that 975 was going to be okay. For me personally, in that scenario, I'm not arguing that. Now, if Kimberly decided she wanted to go on for over $1 million, or even at that 999 spot, which everyone just rounds up to $1 million, then we might have some objection handling to help her reposition, right? And you use some techniques depending on what the actives look like. I may get to ask Kimberly. So Kimberly, you know, at that top number, at that top of the range, what do you notice about how many other properties are actually positioned very similar to the number you just put out there?
Well, there's a lot, and they've been on the market a long time.
I agree with both of those statements. And so what do you think that says about you positioning right there? What are some concerns you might have?
Then I may be on the market right next to them for a long amount of time.
Well, I think that's a very astute observation. And what else? Anything else that you might think of about being kind of crowded up there with everybody else?
Yeah, I think it kind of goes back to that value thing that you were talking about earlier. You know, if I price it just a little bit below and my house is like the other ones that are higher, people may say, I'll buy the less expensive one because I get more. Just like what we talked about in the basic comparables that you showed me. You know, I picked the one that had the updated kitchen and it was less. So
just
yeah.
like, right? Yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. So knowing those two things are just crazy true based on your interpretation of the data.
Yeah.
What move do you think you want to make in terms of a different position for the property?
Yeah, I don't want to go up to that 1 million mark. I'm still thinking, you know, the 975, and then we'll adjust maybe if necessary after 14 days, if that would be okay.
Oh, I think that would be just fine. You're my new favorite seller, right? And so you know, clearly Kimberly has done this before, and she knows how sellers speak and how sellers don't speak. And what we're getting is it's hard when you're skilled to forget your skill, right? Kimberly knows all of the information, and so it's hard for her to be like a seller who doesn't know that information. And yet what she's talking about is exactly right. And what I want you to trust is that when you are confident enough to lay the conversation at their feet, what I have recognized is that many times sellers will surprise you with the conversation that they bring back to you. Remember, human beings want to look good and be right. And so when I lay the conversation at Kimberly's feet, she knows sellers are smart, guys. Sellers are smart. And one of the mistakes that we sometimes make is thinking that the pushback we get from some sellers is because they don't get it.
Well, they get it.
That is almost never the case. They are smart. They see it. They get it. They're struggling accepting it. Mm-hmm. But they see it and they get it. And so to make them wrong is the worst thing on the planet. I'm just going to keep turning it around to Kimberly, because people's desire to look good and be right, even if they can mask it for a couple of times, objection handling on the seller side is actually just continuing to turn it around to them so that at some point they either run out of objections or their desire to look good and be right trumps their want or need to have this $1 million property. Does that make sense to everybody? Mm-hmm. And so pushing it back to Kimberly and asking her, if you listen to the question, what I said to her was, based on what you just discovered, right? I gave her 100% of that credit. That's a great observation. You are reading this exactly perfectly, right? That just makes Kimberly feel like she's right and makes her feel good about what she's looking at. And we want her to continue that momentum. Now, does this always work with every single seller? No, of course not. Nothing works 100% of the time. And yet what I have found is that these techniques will work over time with the same seller, right? Sometimes you have to agree to disagree at a point, and then either decide that the disagreement is a big enough discrepancy that you're going to say no thanks, or it's a small enough discrepancy that you're okay and that you trust your abilities to visit it 2 or 3 weeks later and move the number down with a similar conversation. What are your questions about this process? Nobody has questions about this process? So that means you're all using it brilliantly, or you've decided that you're not doing this regardless of what I say, and you're going to do it your way. Anyway, one of those two things has to be true, or else there'd have to be a question. Any comments on this process? Those of you who use this process, what do you notice about this process versus a process that you used to use?
Well, I would always bring in at least 3 that have that are on the market and use those with the closed 3 that you bring in.
Yeah, and I'm going to suggest that you move away from that.
Yeah, I heard that. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So because the list of actives is actually more important than 3 specific actives. Think about it. They're still on the market, so they're less relevant than what you want to make them. If they were priced properly, they'd be under agreement or sold, right? So using actives as that, you can use actives as a steering mechanism to make sure that they don't go there, right? Because Kimberly went right there. When I asked her, what do you think it means that there's this big crunch of things in the upper reaches there, she went someplace I actually wasn't expecting her to. She went to, well, they look like they've been on the market a long time, and I might fall into that same trap. That was actually a better answer than where I thought the seller would go, which is another really important reason to understand that when you ask it as a question, instead of tell it as an answer, you and the seller make better progress faster. Because if I was going to assume that Kimberly was going to say there were too many at the top ranges, and so I was already prepared to ask her another question about moving out of the crowded area. She didn't go there. She said something even better.
The answer tells you what their motivation is.
100%, right? 100%.
What about using the toolkit presentation?
That's crap. Don't use it.
Don't bother that. Yeah. So Rick, because of that, what Debbie just said, that their answer tells you their motivation, I'm going to go a little further than you did, and I will say that this works 100% with every single seller.
And so what do you mean by that?
What I mean by that is, if you can't come to an agreement based on the facts that we're talking about, they get it,
yeah.
They see it, they know it, and yet they're not willing to price their property in a place where it will sell. And that's a different question.
And so your point that being that this process works to help every seller see what's realistic and what's objective.
Absolutely.
It's just a question of whether or not they're willing to
do it or not. Exactly.
Got it.
Yeah. And I think it's incumbent on us to get to the point where we do commit to the 3 comps and just bring the 3 comps.
Yeah.
Because then we put a stake in the sand as well. We're not telling them the price, but we've given them kind of the parameters.
Yeah.
And so, I think we need to do that on our end as well.
Agreed. And so somebody tell me why you think it is that so many of us get seduced away from this simple process. Why is it that we get seduced into bringing more comps, or every once in a while someone will say to me, there are really only 2 great sold comps. So I brought this other one that's kind of way out in left field just because it was supposed to be 3. Okay. No, it's the best 3 sold comps unless there's only 2. Then you just bring the 2, right? When you bring something out of left field, you're not helping anybody. It's no wonder the seller can't make a valid decision because you've confused them, right? That's not on the seller. We have to take that back on us when we do that to them. You've got to help them see a very narrow tunnel of these are these 3 properties. They're right in this range. That is likely where I'm going to land. And then the only real decision they have to make is timing. Because there's a 30-day number and a 60-day number and a 90-day number and a 180-day number and a never number, right? Those numbers all exist. And that 30-day number is when you decide to position it kind of right in the pocket. I think Kimberly gave us like a 45 to 60-day number, depending on how well the 9s are moving in Japan, right? Which is what we would have looked at in the piece that we skipped. In that month supply of inventory outline that we'll talk about on Wednesday, that's where that information would show up. So we could have gone back to helping Kimberly understand that in the 9s in Japan right now, there's 19 months of inventory. And so I'm curious, Kimberly, knowing that your time frame is a little shorter than 19 months, what might you need to do to position this property to outperform that 19 months? Right, and so then maybe Kimberly moves it down, the positioning. It's why pricing and positioning are 2 different conversations. Price is about the number, right? Positioning is about the strategy. And those are 2 different things. Does that make sense to everybody? And I think sometimes we get stuck on helping people come up with a price, and we don't spend enough time helping people with the positioning aspect of it, with the strategic side of things. Because that's less about guarantees than it is. I don't even know what the word is. Can you guarantee results? It's funny. Sometimes I ask a question and people have a lot of really instantaneous, yes, Gio's shaking his head, all like yes and no, maybe so. Like depends on the day of the week. I don't believe you can guarantee results. Right? What I believe is that you can guarantee objective interpretation and best practices. What else can you guarantee, Debbie? Anything?
I will say I will guarantee you the best results the market will deliver. Yeah,
there you go. Right? So there's a way to use the word guarantee and yet still have it masked in the, this is what we have to work with. Make sense?
Yeah.
So here's what I'd like you to do. I'd like you between now and Wednesday to Zoom with somebody or somebodies. You want to have little groups, you want to do whatever. Find a one-on-one, or if it's not somebody on the call, find somebody in your house to just give you the answers. And I want you just to practice the through line. I don't want you to necessarily memorize the SPA. I don't want you to objection handle someone who's being a jerk. I don't want you to be brilliant with all of your script work that's not part of the SPA, which is all that objection handling. What I want you to do is I want you to practice at least 3 times just going through these words so you hear the through line of this process. And then when we come back on Wednesday, we're going to go through those market conditions graphs. But here's the other thing I want you to do. I want you in your practices to come up with, either from your practices or from real life, objections that you've run into. And let's spend some time on objections, right? Let's spend some time on helping you understand how to help the seller through some of their limitations. Again, doesn't work 100% of the time. You'll hear me say that over and over and over again. Just because you know 4 great objection handlers doesn't mean that you get to win the day. And what that means is you may still have to agree to disagree with the seller. And then we'll talk about what to do, what your options are if you agree to disagree. Because there's still a couple of different paths that you can go down if you agree to disagree with the seller. Depends on how much of a disagreement you have and what your thoughts are, what the seller's thoughts are. But I want you to bring back some objections that come from some of your practices or from some of you who have practiced in real life. What have you heard? Those are sometimes harder because they get specific, and without knowing some of the background, it's hard to address specific objections if you don't know where the objection is coming from, and yet I'll ask some questions around it. And what I'd like to do is just kind of play a little bit on Wednesday so that you can hear how some of this objection handling actually sounds and how it works to help bring sellers back to the facts. Because that's pretty much what we're going to keep doing is keep dialing it back in to help them get back to to the facts and how they're going to justify the numbers that they've put on the table. And then the rest of the day on Wednesday, we will finish up, answer any questions about the listing consultation, and then dive into the anatomy of the listing transaction, which is a list of 79 different things that we'll run through so that you have a checklist of once you actually list the property and receive an offer, all the bazillion things that have to get done to get you to a closing. And then we'll be finished with our seller unit. So by Friday-ish, we'll start our buyer unit. Make sense? All right, guys, I hope this was helpful. Have a lovely evening. Have fun tonight and practice, practice, practice. See you tomorrow, 9 o'clock.